Right, well, hello. Welcome to another edition of Klaus's Fireside Chats. I'm Bob, Head of Sales at Klaus, and really excited for today's guest. So we have Brandon Latteri from Gong on the call. Hello, Brandon.
Hey Bob, how you doing?
I'm really good, thank you. How are you? Where are you dialing in from today?
I'm doing well. I'm actually calling in from my apartment in New York City. I've been living here for quite some time, and as mentioned, it's definitely a little chilly here today. So I apologize. I'm all bundled up in my Gong sweatshirt here.
Very nice. I'm currently in Valencia, but enjoying none of the sunshine because I'm in like an enclosed room. Although there is a fire here that is very real. So yeah, I'm very excited to talk today. I'm a big fan of Gong. Working in sales, I know all about Gong. I've used it before. It's also one of the fastest growing companies in the US. I saw it's now multi-unicorn status. But even more excitingly, I think there's a lot of parallels with Klaus. Like we have similar mission in understanding customers. We have a similar mission. I think also our companies are have a similar kind of vibe and are quite fun and kind of lead the thought leadership in the spaces we exist in. So I'm really excited to dive into that. But maybe before we do, keen for you to introduce yourself, tell me a bit about what you do, let people know what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I'm currently working on the mid-market customer success team for Gong. So working with a subset of our customer base quite closely. In the past, I've actually worked in customer success in more of the VoIP space with another European telecommunications company. So I was there for about 2.5 years within a customer success background, as well as spending some time in the sales component of it. But really excited to have transitioned onto the team at Gong. Have really picked up quite a few learnings already in my first 6 months here, but really excited for what the rest of my time here holds and continuing to gain that education.
Really cool. And yeah, so we'll dive into everything Gong in just a second. But before that, just for our listeners to get to know a bit more about you, I'm going to ask you some hot seat questions, which is a bit of a Klaus special that we like to make all of our new employees feel a bit awkward and ask some interesting questions. I picked some nice safe ones for you today. But yeah, just to kind of warm things up, maybe we can start with who is your favorite cat? Obviously, Klaus is all about cats, so you need to be a fan to be on our fireside chat.
Wow, that was going to be my answer. I think Klaus is without a doubt my favorite cat, but outside of that, I do feel like I have to go with Garfield. That's a classic. But I'd also, if possible, I'd love to give a quick little shout out to some of my friends' cats because there's a couple friends' cats, Mustafa and Teddy, both near and dear in my heart. So I'd have to probably go with both of them. They're both adorable cats.
Nice. I don't think we've ever had a cat shout out before, so there's a first and a privilege for Mustafa and Teddy.
A trendsetter for sure here.
Nice. Number two, do you have any superpowers?
Hmm. I wish I could answer that with a yes. I think if I had any superpowers, I'd be fighting crime instead of helping customers leverage, software applications. But in terms of a superpower for me, I do think in my day to day, I do a really good job of understanding where people are coming from and really putting myself in their shoes. I think that's been super helpful in a customer success role and really a client facing role overall of just, really gaining that insight into what this individual is looking for in this, email or in this conversation and really trying to shape your response and your answers to best suit them. Because I think we all understand that people have a million things going on. I think especially now it's, everyone's incredibly busy with remote work and, possibly working from home with, their kids, their spouse, with a million other things going on in the background. And I think over the last few years, I've gotten really good at understanding someone may be reaching out to you in this conversation that you're having with a customer, and it may not be at 100%, may have a million other things going on. So I think that's somewhere that I've really tried to strengthen over the last few years into what we can consider a superpower. But I'd love to know, Bob, do you have any?
Good question. You've turned around on me. I think empathy is a huge one that, very valuable. So I'm going to steal yours as well. Because I think, yeah, that's the invaluable power to have in the work that we do. Um,
Absolutely.
and then lastly, as a very obvious segue into the actual content, do you own a gong?
So I do own a Gong. I was looking for it this weekend, knowing that I was probably going to need to reference it in this conversation and was not able to find it. So I do have one somewhere. I know. I apologize. That may be a bad omen, but I do have one on my desk at home, hopefully.
Nice, good to hear. I assumed Gong would have branded gongs, but apparently not.
Yeah, I'll be sending this to our marketing team because we are taking some requests for our Gong merch store. So I think that's going to be a good addition.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks. That was the little hot seat warm up. And let's dive into a bit more about Gong. So obviously, I've used Gong. I know a lot about the company. It's in the news a lot recently because of the rapid growth. But for a lot of people listening, it might be relatively new. So I thought maybe it's good if you could just describe in like 10 words, what does Gong do?
Gong is at a high level a revenue intelligence platform that really unlocks visibility into certain aspects of your sales conversations, whether that's team performance, market positioning, or any changes within your market. Um, it's really quite a powerful tool. So there's a lot of different avenues from there, but at a super high level, that's the gist of it.
Really nice, really nice. So what makes Gong different? Obviously, you guys have seen this like stratospheric growth and success recently, clearly tapping into like a need. What do you think, having now joined the company, seeing it from the inside, is setting it apart and kind of standing out from all of the other tech companies around right now?
I think in all actuality, there's a couple different things that Gong does really well to set themselves apart. I think to start from an engineering perspective, I think working at Gong is super exciting as a CSM. I don't think a week goes by without a communication from our product teams or the announcement in our general in our GA channels of just a new feature launch of a new avenue that we've brought to our product team being announced. I think this is something that I've come really really quickly. I've become comfortable with understanding that there's going to be a lot of product change, and I think it is from a CS perspective sometimes tough to keep up with everything that's going on. I also think in more of like the soft skills component of it, I think working at Gong, everyone is incredibly collaborative. I think if there's anything that you need from another team, from another individual, everyone internally is more than happy to go above and beyond to reach out to customers on your behalf, to facilitate any additional information that you need internally. I think that's made my onboarding here so much easier. But I think from like a personal perspective, we're in the process of building out our community right now. So Nisha is in charge of, she's our director of community. And I can't count how many times I've had a customer say, "Oh, Gong, your community's, scaling up real nicely. I'd love to ask, whoever's behind that a few questions," because we're in the process of building a community at our company. So I've tagged Nisha, again, it has to be over 10 times now. And every single time she's, super quickly reached out and said, "Introduce me to that customer. I would love to give them feedback, tell them what I did right, what I did wrong, and make sure that they scale their community," which I think is such an amazing quality of an employee here. Just that willingness to go above and beyond and help a customer, even though it doesn't really relate to her day-to-day work.
Really cool. So many things in common, I think, as well with the way we work at Klaus and yeah, nodding along to a lot of stuff. And one thing I was going to ask you as well is, we operate in this space in CX where we benefit from our own solutions that we're building. And I assumed that, you must use Gong heavily day in, day out. I think you referred to drinking your own champagne, which sounds much more pleasant than what we do at Klaus, which is eat our own cat food. Maybe you can tell me a bit more about that. So, how is Gong helping you day in, day out, and like, improving your own success?
Yeah, absolutely. I think within my day to day, I leverage Gong nonstop. And I know it's probably obvious as a Gong employee that it's easy to do so. But I think in using Gong, every day, I'll have a customer conversation or I'll want to go back to my previous call and really gain that insight into what was mentioned. As a human, my memory is only as strong as it can be. So in leveraging Gong, I'm able to go back into my previous calls, and listen back on it, take notes, look at important insights, and from there come into my next call so much more prepared. And really from an onboarding perspective too, in the first 6 months of just consistently listening to what some of our top performers are doing, it's so amazing. We have this internal culture of, if you want to steal, a talk track, go ahead, take it. If you see something that you really like, you're, well within your right to go in and more or less copy it and use it in your conversations, because it's kind of, why reinvent the wheel. And I also think, there's so much tagging back and forth. Like with my manager, I super regularly tag her in my calls and say, hey, I would just love a little bit of insight into this. Or when you get a chance, can you listen back and let me know, what I did really well and maybe areas I can improve on.
Yeah, and this is like a whole new area, because I think beforehand everything was you didn't have that data. You weren't recording stuff, so things were operating in like silos, and that knowledge would be trapped in individuals' heads. And it's similar to what Klaus is doing. You've got to start measuring the quality of these interactions before you can even start improving it and sharing that internally. And is this what you guys refer to as revenue intelligence at Gong? This kind of new world of data around improving conversations?
Absolutely. I think in terms of revenue intelligence, it really is kind of going a bit deeper. And I actually really like your call out that you had mentioned of, all that's staying within your sales reps, heads. I couldn't imagine a decade ago having a sales conversation and then having my AE come back to me as, let's say a VP of sales and say, this is what was mentioned. There's no recording. I took some notes super quickly, jotted them down. They may be right, they may be wrong. And that's my opinion of this conversation. Within revenue intelligence, it really is analyzing those conversations, transcribing them, making sure that we're getting the key points of interest, things like that. And future state is super exciting as well. I'm really excited to see, what comes down the pipeline with this. But I think at the time being, revenue intelligence is really giving you that deep insight into what's going on within those conversations from a real analytical and data perspective. I think something that I really love is Gong Labs, which is where members of our team, take that information, make it anonymous, and then, take a look at some of those data points and really, dive deep into what's working and what isn't. One of the most recent ones that I read, which was super exciting, is we took a look at 300,000 emails and saw what intro lines work super well and which ones don't. So that's like a really cool component of what we're doing, of really understanding exactly what does make an A player within some of these communications.
Really cool. And what intro line works best out of interest?
You're putting me on the spot here. This is a sign of how human memory works. I have to go back and reference it. I think I've gotten a little too drunk on the champagne possibly and gotten too used to just being able to reclaim any communication.
Look up anything, like relying on Google, everything's in there now.
I think I'm technically Gen Z, so this is just a generational problem perhaps, but I've grown up surrounded by computers and cell phones and I couldn't imagine it any other way.
Oh, fair. And I imagine at Gong, customer success is a huge priority. Obviously, you're operating in the CX space. You need to kind of prove that as well and kind of live and breathe that way of working. I'm assuming you guys have a very big customer success team.
Yes, I don't know the exact number of CX employees, but I can say it's definitely a larger component of our organization. And I think there's a lot of focus within the CX org. I think something that somebody had told me about a year or two ago at my previous organization is that quite often when you're buying a product, you are buying the customer experience. So I think, within Gong, there's so much amazing benefits that you get from the platform, but a lot of the actual experience is truly working with our teams and working with incredibly knowledgeable individuals in, whatever area that may be, whether that's, sales methodology or data insights within the platform. And that's a really exciting selling piece, for our customers, is that you get to work with some of the most knowledgeable individuals in the industry.
And how do you guys measure success?
Oh, there's so many ways to measure success. I think within, with a focus of Gong, I think at Gong, the way we really measure success is often related to a couple different fields. One really being the utilization and the actual adoption of the product. I think we've created a process which I really enjoy, which is, broken down into a couple different meetings. So upon becoming a Gong customer, we'll really spend some time with you to understand your actual business pains and Gong aside, what are you looking to do for the next 6 to 12 months? Are you trying to increase revenue, reduce attrition? Are you trying to, scale a new team or a new market? We'll sit down with you and say, great, that's the end goal. That's the end state. how do we help you get there? So for me personally, in working with customers, there is the actual like utilization and the account growth and those metrics for success. But the real end state is, are we making a positive impact on how you're running your teams, how you're running your business, and are we giving you insights that you previously couldn't see? So I think like, for an example, I've recently worked with a customer. The utilization is great, the adoption is great, but every time we hop onto a call and we work through a new expected workflow within Gong, you can see their face light up. You can see the excitement that they have because they know they can go back to their C-suite and say 40% of these calls have this talk track mentioned. We can scale that to 60. That'll have this much of an impact on our close one revenue. And that excitement for me is truly what success looks like, is really driving that internally.
Really nice. And so obviously the last couple of years have been pretty crazy, and I guess it's fueled in some ways the adoption of Gong, as well as everyone's been moving online onto digital conversations, and people realizing they might be new to it and they're not even sure how to kind of measure how those are going. How have you seen kind of COVID and the move online affect Gong and kind of affect people's interactions in general?
I think within Gong, from what I've seen in my time here, I think there is definitely a need to have a platform like this, just because as a sales manager, like I would honestly love to understand how you've, managed the last, 2 years of running a remote team. I imagine it's quite tricky. I think we're getting to a place where it's going to be a bit more hybrid, but I do think that remote is here to stay. And I think, it's become incredibly evident that you need a number of different platforms to really properly run a sales team or a support team or a success team, if you're in different geographical locations. I think with Gong, like as I mentioned, reviewing calls and really being able to tag your manager or other colleagues in customer conversations is something that's super important, and it's going to be super scalable within this platform. But I think from a personal perspective, I've seen remote really change a lot of different things. I think the one that I've noticed is that it's become a bit trickier to, I think, show personality in a way. I think, in certain conversations, a lot of Zoom meetings are somewhat transactional. And I think something I've tried to do personally is like spend the first few minutes, kind of just bringing in personal anecdotes, chatting a little bit, discussing where someone might be located. I hate to use the weather as an example. I think that's such an easy option, but jumping on a call and just having a human connection for the first few minutes before you really dive into, whatever 25-30 minute meeting you have set aside, I think is incredibly crucial.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think speaking from my own experience, like with Gong, like, and I think with Klaus as well, like the way of working beforehand, before these kind of new solutions have come in that are helping kind of manage this, it's like incredibly manual process. And in my last role, I was managing a team in lots of different time zones, different levels of knowledge, different levels of onboarding, and in order to properly understand what's going on, I would have to join calls and often or watch full length recordings. And a big part of the value, I think, from what Gong and Klaus do is like helping you identify where to look. So the transcription of Gong of just like, hey, I can very quickly jump in and see where the issues are, and enabling you to give that feedback in a much kind of quicker way is a lifesaver. So that whole like anxiety that you might be missing something, I think for me that was the biggest thing that Gong kind of helped and kind of scale up.
Absolutely.
So how do you predict the things are going to change in the future? Obviously, customer success itself has gone through a lot of changes recently in the last 10 years, last year even. How do you think customer success will kind of adapt in the future?
I think customer success in the future is going to change in two ways. I think one, CSMs are going to be pushed into a more, focused area. I think as a CSM, you're not going to be a multi-tool. I think you're going to be hyper specialized in one area of the customer journey or the product. I think that's something that I'm seeing now.
Hyper specialization.
Exactly. And I feel like that's almost all industries. I don't think that's unique to customer success. I think this is a bit of a tangent, but I read a story years ago about a surgeon who decided he wanted to be the best thumb doctor in the world. So if you had any thumb injury, you would go to him. A lot of people laughed and, kind of joked about it at first, but, if you're a baseball player, a famous musician, and you need your thumbs to do your job, you're going to go to the best of the best. And I think that's kind of, where we're moving, in the sense of, if I'm going to be working with somebody on a specific part of the customer journey, I want to be with someone who's hyper focused in that area, someone who's incredibly knowledgeable. And I think it's often with smaller companies, earlier scale ups, that, you have a CSM or someone in that position who's going to have to be knowledgeable in a million different areas. I think this is something I saw in my previous company as we scaled from Series B to Series D. It was incredibly exciting to see how roles changed and how individuals took on more siloed missions, basically, instead of just running around, doing a million things at once. I think that's going to be a larger component of it. But I also think the actual CSM role is going to change a bit as well. I think something that I've noticed throughout my career has always been the push for customer autonomy. So having the customers themselves really drive what they need within the platform. And I think Gong is doing an amazing job through our academy and our community, which are two areas where customers can come in and really do self-paced lessons or live trainings. So we're taking that component and sort of putting it in the hands of the customer to say, if you're interested in learning more about how you can leverage this platform, you can go ahead and do that on your own. You can self-register, and you can even ask questions within that. You could take specific lessons that you need. And then afterwards, you can go to our community and you can search and see if anyone has previously asked certain questions or how other customers are leveraging the platform of their organizations. And I think it's going to become more of the CSM's position to help in leveraging these platforms instead of being that source of information for those two things. I've seen a lot of success with my customers. And, specifically, I think my most successful customers are the ones that are really, really excited to take advantage of this. Individuals who are saying, oh, yes, our entire team is going to, join a live training. And then they're going to take the supplemental education. So now they're, experts within how to leverage Gong.
Yeah, the idea of like turning customers into thought leaders themselves, and then they're the ones who'll be vocal in the community and kind of teaching other people, and we can take a back seat.
Absolutely. And I know it sounds, maybe like a lazy perspective, but I do think, at the end of the day, I feel like there's this expectation to immediately respond to customers, not at Gong, but in general as a CSM. I think we often have this need to say, oh, we're helpful. We want to be helpful people, and we're going to respond immediately. But sometimes what a customer is looking for has already been asked. It's already been built within our community or within our academy or even our help center. And, empowering them to have those tools and something we talk about all the time internally is train the trainer. So, if I can work with my point of contact at, a specific company and make sure that, like you said, like they're a thought leader, they're, an incredibly educated Gong user, then they can go and be that person at their company and really be that resource internally and that advocate for Gong.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. And is the Gong community like open to anyone, or do you have to be a customer? How does, tell me more about the community itself. Can I join it and talk about all things sales?
I do think within that, you are going to need a Gong license to access it. But I will say, if you are a Gong customer and you have any questions around, really kind of, how are other teams leveraging Gong, what's been successful in the past, or even, again, to eating our own cat food and drinking our own champagne. If you're curious on how the CS team at Gong uses Gong, we have plenty of documentation around that. We have videos, we have, workflow explanations. So you can really hop into there and, again, gain that insight and get that individual access to that.
Cool. And so a couple of things I think Gong does differently. The other aspect is that you guys don't take yourself too seriously, at least on the outside. Like the marketing is very fun. Is it like that at Gong as well? Is that really like part of the culture? Tell me a bit more about that.
Internally, we do spend, a good chunk of our time really, really working hard and really striving to hit certain, goals and initiatives. But there's always a little bit of time hollowed out for celebration, for joyous moments to say, wow, like look back on this quarter, look how we did. Let's take a few minutes to celebrate, to enjoy it together. And I do think, something that we've talked about and something I'd recommend to anyone in the CS field is in your customer conversations, strive to have the best talk tracks and really, hone in on your language, but also don't lose sight of, who you are personally. something that someone has told me recently is, taking your own personal voice and adding that, it is so impactful in customer conversations. And I think that's something that's really encouraged at Gong, is to show your true self. And, we don't, personally want someone showing up and putting on a facade of who they are. And I think it's super exciting to work somewhere where, you get to be exactly who you want to be.
I like that because yeah, the risk maybe is that like you only go by the data. Like the data shows I need to say exactly this, this, and this, and this, and then you lose the personality in it. So
Exactly. And it's, you want to come into customer conversations with some of those insights and things that are impactful. But, again, to our earlier point of, in the remote world, it's so easy to, I think, become a bit more automated in what you say. So it's really important to keep that in the back of your mind and really bring in some humanity.
no, definitely. So just to change focus a little bit, I think we spoke about some of the things that you do well at Gong, and what about a mistake or learning, either that you've seen yourself make or at Gong that our listeners can learn from?
I think I have two that really stay with me. The main one, and I think this is a great life lesson in general, is to always prepare properly. I think what I've started doing in my customer conversations is I'll come in and I'll actually in my notes write what my end goal is for this, conversation. Are we jumping on here to move the needle a bit, or are we just coming here to speak? And I've found that when I do that, it keeps me honest. It keeps me onto to that track. But I'll also say, like, what I'll do is I'll write 2 or 3 questions, because I think I've learned from previous experiences of jumping onto a customer call and not being incredibly prepared with the questionings that I'm going to bring to that conversation. And to be honest with you, it is a bit embarrassing. So I think that's a huge lesson that I've learned. And I also think from a specific customer experience is that sometimes you do need to bend the process a little bit. And that kind of goes back into, maybe being a bit more robotic. I think it's important to understand when, a certain process may not be super impactful for a customer. I had a specific customer who had an understanding of our onboarding process that was not what our onboarding process exactly looks like. But, we were able to work through it and really check the boxes that we needed to, but also to do it in a way that was going to be impactful and important for the customer. And I think I saw that as an experience of them kind of saying, at first we weren't prepared for what this entailed, but thank you for, working through it with us. And we incredibly appreciate the flexibility in changing, this specifically for us. I think keeping that in the back of your mind at all times and just understanding exactly, what you're doing, what the end goal is, and making sure that it does resonate with the individuals that you're speaking to is super, super impactful.
Yeah, nice. That goes back to your kind of empathy superpower, right? So really understanding through the customer's eyes. That's good. And do you have any other kind of secrets for keeping customers happy, or other ways that customer success teams can really stand out for their customers?
I feel like in terms of secrets, I wish I had more. I think in terms of how customer success teams can stand out, the one thing I always say is I think keeping honest. If you mention that you're going to send something over, or if you're going to do something for a customer, I think it's super important to follow through with that. I think that's an area that I've seen even myself over my career get better at, of saying, oh, I'll send this over tonight. And then, if I wait till the next morning, it's not the end of the world, but making sure that it does get done within a timely fashion. Just because I think, again, to our earlier point of the empathy component is, there are other people who have, overarching business goals. They have their own teams and their own managers who may be, waiting on that information or waiting on, your platform and your communications. So I think it's important to keep that relevant at all times. I'm curious though, what does Klaus do differently? Is there anything I should be taking away from this that I can maybe bring to the Gong team?
There's a lot of secrets that can obviously not be revealed, but no, I think in general, definitely eating our own cat food helps. It helps us steer the product. It helps us succeed as a success and support org too. So I think we've had proudly 100% CSAT scores with our customer support the last few months.
Oh, wow.
Probably from using Klaus, but also because our team is exceptional. But that's helpful. And then what you said, I couldn't agree with more. So just like being really empathetic, honest, and everything around kind of turning customers into thought leaders, really building a community around it. You're not just a client and supplier relationship. You're actually part of a broader community of people who believe in something and believe in this mission and sharing ideas and pushing what we can do forward together, in a very broad way. But I'll tell you some secrets offline as well.
Yeah, I'll be looking forward to that email. I'll definitely bring them back. But that's super exciting to hear. 100% CSAT. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. You'll have to speak to our support team to find out the secrets there. Cool. And so you mentioned a bit about Gong's labs and the roadmap and the exciting things. What's next for Gong? You're already doing a lot right, clearly. But I'm curious if you can share a bit of like what the roadmap looks like.
I wish I could. I truthfully don't think I have enough insight to speak with certainty on exactly what's coming up next. I do think from where we stand here, it is a super exciting path forward. I think we've already got such an amazing customer base, and I think so much product validation that it's going to only become more exponential. I think we're only going to get better at what we're doing now and just continue to really strive in these areas and hopefully expand into new avenues.
Yeah, I have no doubts. Like I'm sure Gong is in a very good position already, and with the kind of whole wave of customer experience, like more and more companies are becoming more and more acutely aware that that's the difference between good experience and like exceptional one that will keep people coming back. So I think you will have more and more fans.
I hope so. And I do think we really, as I mentioned, like we really do try to go above and beyond to create such raving fans. But I think so much of it too is just really solving a lot of these, fundamental business concerns and issues. I think I had a professor in college once who gave me a really great piece of advice for entrepreneurship, which was, if you think you have a problem, and if that problem gives you a headache, if you have a physical headache from wanting to solve that problem, sleep on it for a month. If you wake up every morning for a month and you still have that headache, you found a solution. And I really think at Gong, we've mastered that in the sense of, I think we've taken headache level problems for a lot of businesses and within one platform really resolved most of them.
Nice. That's a good analogy to remember. And maybe, a good analogy to end on. So yeah, thanks so much, Brandon. Really exciting to hear a bit of the inside scoop on what's going on at Gong and the great stuff you guys are doing. And yeah, thanks everyone for watching, and there'll be another Klaus Fireside chat very soon.
Appreciate it, Bob. Thank you.